Let's unpack the markets day now. We've got Joseph Busha of Busha Investments who joins us this evening. As always, Mr. Busha, thank you very much for your time. Let's start with the market performance today. Quite a bit of losses that we saw to end off the trading day on the JSE. The all-share not closing off too well. Globally, I was reading earlier that geopolitical events are really spooking market participants in terms of a global recession, especially in Europe with that natural gas crisis. And then, of course, I think people are still feeling the effects of the fact that the United States GDP contracted by almost 1%.
Good evening, Ms. Madzena and eNCA viewers. Certainly, I think, it's very, very tough times. The market ending down about 1%. And there's several factors that's really affecting the market. We've got the geopolitical issues between the US and China, where the Ms. Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker of House Speaker in the U.S. visiting Taiwan, and China is opposed to that. So certainly, I think we don't want another kind of geopolitical tension after we having what's happening there between Russia and Ukraine, which is pushing inflation up in the Eurozone, given that Russia, supplies quite a lot of gas to Europe. So the market down 1%, the JSE. We saw the retailers massively down also today. Truist, Pepco, Woody's all down. And the results from Massmart does also not paint a good picture. Headline earnings per share down about 40%, despite the fact that their was just marginally up.
And I want us to kind of weigh in on that, on Massmart. But before we do, let's look at the rand, Mr. Busha, because it has remained relatively stable despite being at around 16.61 at the moment. Your thoughts on its stability, just given what's happening around it? And I do wonder, Mr. Busha, if Ms. Nancy Pelosi's actions to go to Taiwan are not going to have an even bigger effect on what's going on. But just your short-term thoughts on the local unit.
Also, it is quite surprising. Remember, it spoke to us some few weeks ago when it was touching about 17 rands per US dollar. So certainly, I think, once it's below 17 rands per dollar, it's kind of comforting to South Africans, in particular from an importing perspective. We still import quite significant imports from overseas. So it has been stable, and I think that's good. But also, I think, the US, given the fact that inflation has remained stubbornly high, gas or energy sources also remaining high, which is putting a pressures on the US dollar and the interest rate. So if the interest rate rises in the US and ours remain relatively stable because of the purchasing parity, certainly the rand will strengthen and will obviously get better. But I think we're hoping that this tension between China and the US does not really give into also the emerging market riskiness again.
Company updates. We'll start with Massmart, simply because you made reference to it when you were just explaining movements on the local bourse today. I mean, Massmart's story is not a great one, Mr. Busha, really dealing with pressure on the consumers as well as other issues in their business. I'm thinking about Game here, which continues to be the problem child. They're really trying to fix Game, but they're just not getting it right. What did you make of that update that they shared with us today?
So since Walmart came into SA, certainly I think they haven't done well. They tried to sell Rhino, Fresh, and Cambridge last year. Remember, they did that to Pick and Pay. That hasn't really helped. And you see that the results in the rest of Africa were worse than, obviously, those in SA. So I think Massmart has really struggled. They sold or closed most of their John-wired shops as well. So I think they've struggled really to settle down and to start really having the turnaround they were hoping for in the sector. And this is really in contrast to what we saw from some of the retailers, your Pick and Pay in the last 1 week or two.
Yeah. Yeah, and of course, I think it's a really tough one for Walmart veteran Mitch Sleip, who was brought on to take over the reins and try implement that strategy. Mr. Busha, before we wrap up our conversation, Telkom, what did you make of their first quarter earnings? I mean, they are blaming the lower numbers that came in on higher cost structures that have come through in terms of operational costs, but also the fact that data prices are coming down and, it's not so easy for a relatively smaller player like Telkom. I'm wondering if this MTN Telkom deal isn't even more attractive at this stage.
I was going to say that you just hit the nail on the head there. MTN might have seen that Telkom is battling. So the bride certainly did not show very good colors today in terms of printing numbers. Revenue down about 3%, EBITDA in terms of the profit indicator down about 15% to about 2.3 billion. So that's not really good. And I think that will just put pressure onto that and might persuade shareholders possibly to say, let's listen to MTN. But I still believe Telkom has got a role to play. Vacants to kind of climb and eat into the margins after they got BSX and some of the business they have. I remember they sold, I think, Yellow Pages, which is now called Trudeau. They could have been doing very well in terms of classified advertising and marketing to just spread their revenue. But they talk about their home fiber growing up about 45%, the fixed line traffic growing up with about 18%. So I think their problems, they need to be clearly spelled out, given what the outgoing CEO was earning. So he's earning 20 million in terms of just his exit and so on. So MTN might have some leg and a little bit of bargaining power, given that the numbers do not look good.
Thank you very much, Mr. Busha, as always, for your wrap of the markets today. That is Joseph Busha from Busha Investments giving us a wrap of the markets. And Sally, that's all your business for now. I mean, 20 million rand for the outgoing CEO. We're clearly in the wrong business.
That would not be the first time a journalist has bewailed their state. Thank you very much, Rofhiwa.